Hello, Mr. Allman here, and this is your Allmancast Introduction to Evolution. Evolution is widely considered the unifying principle of biology, because all of the many topics within the study of life can be explained when viewed through the lens of evolution, which is simply the slow, gradual change in life over time. In this video, I want to introduce you to some of the main key players in the development of this theory in the late 19th century, and then follow that with a more detailed explanation of natural selection, which was the primary mechanism proposed by Darwin to explain how and why it is that life changes. So, as we look at what people thought about life on Earth 200 years ago, and scientists from other disciplines proposed ideas from their own perspectives that Darwin certainly read the books of and at times even corresponded with as he developed his theory. First, starting from geology, there was a lot of work being done in being able to dig up fossils and looking at the fossil record present in the ground. Now, fossil remains are left behind when a living thing gets buried in sediment. And that sediment is going to be at the bottom of a river or at the bottom of a seabed. So, what's the reason for these sediments? Rock takes a long time to form. It doesn't form over several years or centuries, but it forms over many tens or hundreds of thousands of years. And as you dig down deeper in those layers of rock, you get to older and older fossils. So why is it that the types of living things found in one given place don't necessarily match up with the climate? For example, why could you dig in a desert and find the skeleton of a sea creature beneath there? The presence of these peculiar fossils is what led people like Cuvier to be able to question why it is that there's evidence of living things in the past that are no longer present on Earth today. What were those things? Why were they there? And where did they go? The geologist Lyell proposed the idea of uniformitarianism, which is that the processes happening on Earth now are similar to those that happened in the past. In other words, the rules that govern what happens to life and what happens to the rock and all of the inorganic things on the Earth today probably existed in much the same way in the past. And so we should not assume that there was any great change or any sudden anything sudden that may have happened to be able to change the form and type of life present on Earth. His book, The Principles of Geology, proposed that the Earth is not new, but actually is very old, looking at things like the amount of time that it would take to build up sediment in those rock layers that you looked at previously. We can combine this with the work of economists, such as Thomas Malthus. Malthus was looking a lot at the human population and making predictions about the limits to the rise in human population. However, his ideas could also apply to other forms of life, and that if the population increases, that's possible, but for only a short period of time. They cannot continue to grow forever. They cannot continue to grow forever because there is competition. There are limited resources available, not only for humans, but there's limited energy, there's limited space, there's limited water, there's limited salt. There are many different things that may prevent the continued growth of a population. And so that idea of the fact that there is competition and limited space certainly also stuck with Darwin as he considered the origin of life. Now, Lamarck was a biologist, and he was also trying to look at how it is that life changed. He saw that evidence that living things would change over time. And what he proposed was an idea that acquired characteristics would be inherited. So therefore, if you had two parents who both worked very hard, were bodybuilders and had giant muscles, that they would acquire this characteristic and in some way pass on that characteristic to their offspring, and that their offspring would then also have giant, strong muscles. Anything, if it was used, it would be passed on, but if it was not used, it would be gotten rid of. So part of this idea was right, and a big part of it was wrong. At least technically wrong in the way that Lamarck thought that it was. These are some of the big ideas that was in and around Darwin at the time that he was doing thinking and writing about the origin of species. Now, a little bit of background on Darwin. So he was fairly undistinguished as a child, as a student, and as a young adult. He was from a wealthy family, and that afforded him the opportunity to continuously change his mind and not be forced into any particular field. He actually did very poorly at the family practice of medicine and equally poorly at becoming a minister. And so some of the more well-regarded fields were actually closed to him, either because of his own choice or because of his inability. As a result, he was still in this process of trying to figure out what he was going to do with his career when family connections got him a role as a scientific companion, as a gentleman's companion for the captain of a sailing ship, the HMS Beagle. So for 5 years in his 20s, he was the ship's naturalist and primarily was a dinner and drinking buddy for the captain. So during this time, he read, he collected, he wrote about all of the many things that he saw. You can see traced here the path down the coast of South America and around the west coast of South America, and a long stop at the Galapagos Islands. And it's really in this first stop that we're going to pick out one of his more famous examples of natural selection. The Galapagos are a set of islands that are extremely geographically isolated. There is very little land for many thousands of miles around. So this little archipelago represents really a series of islands within a sea of ocean. And it was looking at some of the animals here that Darwin really had some of these aha moments. If you want to read along the quote with me. The natural history of these islands is eminently curious and well deserves attention. Most of the organic productions are aboriginal creations, found nowhere else. There is even a difference between the inhabitants of the different islands. Yet all show a marked relationship with those of America, though separated from that continent by an open space of ocean between 500 and 600 miles in width. Hence, both in space and time, we seem to be brought somewhere near to that great fact, that mystery of mysteries, the first appearance of new beings on this earth. So, as Darwin was looking at the living things on this island, he was particularly drawn to how they were different and yet not completely different from the other species that he had previously been studying on the mainland of South America. Some of the unusual things, marine iguanas, which are the only swimming lizard present in the world, which certainly comes in handy if you are going to live on a small set of tiny islands in the isolated ocean. The giant tortoises are a keystone species here and are very important in terms of maintaining the diversity of plant life. They are one species but do show variations between the different islands, differences between the populations on those islands. But most importantly, the finches. A finch is a small species of bird, and each of these species of birds has of the 12 across the Galapagos Islands, have a different beak structure. And that beak structure influences what it is they can eat. And so, by extension, what food is available is then going to influence the type of beak that's going to be present in the birds on a particular island. Now, what's true is that all of these birds shared a common immigrant ancestor. So there was some singular bird or small group of birds that, by some chance, came from mainland South America and landed here in the Galapagos Islands. And this was his primary example of natural selection found in his book. So after this adventure, Darwin was swimming in all of these ideas about the origin of species. He published his journal and went on living life. Again, a fairly undistinguished life, at least scientifically. And he didn't do anything to be able to publish his greater ideas about how it is that life changed and thus how life emerged over time. But he got a letter from Alfred Russel Wallace, who was a young naturalist, not a professional scientist, but one who was also thinking of some of these same ideas that Darwin was. He wrote a letter that proposed to Darwin natural selection and descent by modification, the same idea that Darwin had 20 years ago. So Darwin responded to the letter, wrote a paper, and both papers were accepted and published simultaneously in a journal. So that dual publication led then to work on a book on the origin of species by means of natural selection. So this book then led to a rapid growth and development of the field of evolution into the future. From here, we're going to go on in the next video to an understanding of natural selection and breakdown of natural selection and how it works.